They call it the door of the Puma, but for modern engineers it is a nightmare scenario. The precision of the drill holes and the perfect right angles shouldn't be possible without diamond tools and electricity. For years, people whispered about lost civilizations, but the truth discovered in 2025 is stranger than any myth. It wasn't magic, it was chemistry. Advanced scans have detected artificial binders and vitrification signatures locked inside the stone matrix. This isn't just about big rocks. It is about a civilization that wielded a power we have forgotten. The diamond cut theory. You won't find the rough hand-hewn texture of the Inca or the Romans here. Instead, you see smooth glass-like surfaces, sharp interior right angles, and drill holes so precise they look like they were bored by a laser yesterday. For generations, the locals have repeated a legend that sounds like pure fantasy. They claim that the joints between these massive stones are so tight that you cannot even slip a razor blade between them. It sounds like a tourist trapline. But here is the catch. Modern engineers have gone there with feeler gauges, the kind used to tune high-performance engines, and they realized the legend was actually an understatement. The precision is terrifying. We are talking about blocks of andesite. This is a volcanic rock with a high silica content. On the Mohs scale of hardness, it is tough. Really tough. To cut it effectively, you need something harder than the stone itself. In the modern world, we use diamond-tipped saws and high-speed carbide drills. The official story, the one written in every textbook from here to Harvard, is that the Tiwanaku culture built this place around 1,500 years ago. They say they used stone hammers and bronze chisels. Yeah, about that. Have you ever tried to cut granite or andesite with a bronze tool? Bronze is a soft metal. If you strike andesite with a bronze chisel, the chisel deforms. It dulls in seconds. It would be like trying to cut through a steel door with a plastic butter knife. You could bang on it for 1,000 years and you would just have a pile of bent copper and a headache. You wouldn't get a perfect polished right angle. So how did they do it? How did they create these perfect H-shaped blocks with complex inner grooves that lock together like a three-dimensional puzzle? The sheer scale of the place adds another layer of impossibility. We are talking about red sandstone slabs that weigh up to 130 tons. That is the weight of 25 African elephants. And they move these slabs across the high plains, the altiplano, without the wheel. And let's talk about the environment. This is above the tree line. There are no massive trees here to cut down and use as rollers. There is no wood for heavy sleds. So how do you drag a 100-ton slab 10 miles from the quarry across rocky terrain without rollers? The official answer is a lot of people and ropes. But the physics don't play nice with that theory. At 13,000 feet, oxygen levels are low. Physical exertion is twice as hard. Marshalling the thousands of men required to drag these stones would be a logistical nightmare of food, water, and sanitation that the archaeological record barely supports. But in 2025, the mystery shifted from how did they move it to what are these things actually? Because when you look at the cuts, really look at them under magnification, something is wrong. There are no tool marks, no chisel strikes, no signs of the pounding and grinding that defines every other ancient site on Earth. The surfaces are smooth, almost polished. The interior corners, the inside of the box shapes, are sharp. A rotating tool like a drill or a saw leaves a rounded inner corner. A chisel leaves a jagged one. These corners are perfect 90-degree angles. To do that with a tool, you need a broaching machine or a laser. And that brings us to the wildest theory of all. Sound. There are legends in the Andes similar to those in Tibet of monks using sound waves to levitate stones. It sounds like magic, but acoustic levitation is a real scientific phenomenon. We can do it today with small droplets of water and styrofoam balls. Could a civilization that understood the resonance of stone use sound to soften or move these blocks? The new scans didn't find sound waves, obviously, but they found something just as disturbing. They were looking for chemical anomalies, and what they found inside the cuts challenges the very definition of natural. The data suggests that these stones might not be natural rock at all. The implications of this are massive. If these blocks weren't quarried but engineered, then we are looking at a lost technology that allowed ancient builders to manipulate matter on a molecular level. The scans found a structure that shouldn't be there, and to make sense of this impossible geometry, scientists had to stop looking at the ruins on the ground and start building them in the cloud. The virtual restoration. To understand what was found inside the stone, we first have to understand what this place was supposed to look like. Because right now, Punku is a disaster zone. It looks like a giant kicked over a sandcastle. This destruction wasn't just caused by time or earthquakes, it was caused by us. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, railway crews plowed through the area. They didn't see a priceless heritage site of a lost civilization. They saw a convenient pile of raw material. They blasted the ruins with dynamite, shattering these perfect blocks to use as gravel for train tracks. It is heartbreaking to think about. Thousands of years of history were blown apart to build a railroad that hardly anyone uses anymore. This vandalism left the site in total chaos. The H-blocks were tossed around, buried, and split in half. For decades, archaeologists tried to map it out, but the puzzle pieces were too heavy to move and too scattered to make sense of. It was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube that had been smashed with a hammer. But technology has finally caught up. In recent years, researchers stopped trying to move the stones physically and started moving them virtually. A massive project was launched to create a digital twin of Punku. They used advanced drones and LiDAR to map every single crack, every groove, and every block to within a fraction of a millimeter. Basically, they turned the entire ruin into a high-resolution 3D model. Once they had the data, they didn't just look at it, they simulated it. They used supercomputers to virtually lift the stones and try to fit them back together. And this is where things get wild. When they tried to assemble these virtual blocks, they realized something that had been missed for a century. The blocks were modular. They weren't unique snowflakes carved individually for specific spots in a wall. They were standardized, mass-produced components. One H-block fit perfectly into the next. They could be swapped out, rearranged, and interlocked in multiple configurations. This is exactly how we build with Legos or prefabricated concrete today. It implies a level of planning that is staggering. You don't get this kind of standardization by banging rocks together with stone tools. You get it from a blueprint, a standard of measurement, and a factory-like production line. The digital reconstruction revealed a structure that was terrifyingly advanced. The blocks weren't just stacked, they were keyed. They had dovetail joints and clamp sockets that held them together against earthquakes. And get this, the computer simulation showed that if you dropped these blocks into place, they would self-center. The geometry was designed to guide the heavy stones into the perfect position using gravity alone. That is genius engineering. But the digital twin also highlighted a strange anomaly: the layout. When the researchers assembled the platform, it didn't look like a temple. It didn't look like a palace. It looked like a circuit board. Some fringe theorists have looked at the layout of the H-blocks with their complex channels and drill holes and suggested that this wasn't a building for people. They argue it was a machine. The H shapes look suspiciously like insulators or waveguides. The channels drilled through the stones could have carried water, sure, but they could have also carried something else. Wires, mercury, molten gold? We know they used metal clamps. Archaeologists have found the indentations for eye-shaped clamps that were poured into place. These clamps were made of a unique arsenic copper bronze alloy. Metal conducting electricity between massive dielectric stones? It sounds like a giant capacitor. The digital model proved that the design was sound. It proved the builders had a master plan. But it couldn't explain how they made the parts. It was like finding a jet engine in a Roman ruin. You can see how it fits together, but you have no idea how they cast the turbine blades. The virtual restoration proved the logic, but the physical mystery remained. Let's talk about the red sandstone. These are the massive slabs that form the foundation of Punku. For a long time, everyone assumed these were just big rocks quarried from a nearby mountain and dragged here. It makes sense, right? That is how the Egyptians did it. That is how the Greeks did it. But here is the catch. There is no quarry nearby that matches this stone perfectly, and moving a 130-ton slab across a mountain range without wheels is a logistical nightmare that has never been convincingly explained. So scientists decided to take a closer look at the stone itself. They cut thin slices of the sandstone, sections thinner than a human hair, and put them under a scanning electron microscope. This machine fires a beam of electrons at the sample to create an image magnified thousands of times. It also tells you exactly what elements are in the rock, and that is when the alarm started going off. The microscope detected high concentrations of something called sodium carbonate, or natron. Now, for those of us who aren't geologists, natron is a salt. It is found in dry lake beds. The ancient Egyptians used it for mummification. But here is the thing. Natron is not typically found inside solid sandstone mountains in the Andes. It doesn't belong there. So, why was the stone full of it? This led to a controversial theory. Geopolymers. Basically, the theory goes like this. The builders didn't cut these stones, they mixed them. They took loose sand, crushed rock, and mixed it with a binder like natron and water. This created a chemical reaction that turned the mushy paste into solid rock. Think of it like concrete, but on a molecular level. It is indistinguishable from natural stone to the naked eye, but under a microscope it looks different. The scans showed amorphous binder phases. In plain English, that means the stuff holding the sand grains together wasn't natural geological glue, it was a chemical glue. It looked like it had been reacted, not sedimented over millions of years. If this is true, it solves the transport problem instantly. You don't need to drag a 100-ton rock across the mountains. You just carry baskets of sand and mix it on site. You pour it into a mold, let it dry, and boom, you have a perfect massive slab. It also explains the precision. If you are pouring liquid stone into a mold, you can get perfect flat surfaces and sharp corners every single time. It is just like pouring Jell-O. The mold does the work, not the chisel. Research teams actually tried to replicate this. They took local materials, mixed them with natron and vinegar, an acid, and let it set. The result? A hard, durable stone that looked exactly like the Puma Punku sandstone. And under the microscope, it had the same chemical signature. But let's take it a step further. What if it wasn't just mixing? What if it was heat? There is another wild theory gaining traction called the solar lens hypothesis. Some researchers suggest that the Incas and the cultures before them possessed large, polished gold mirrors. If you focus enough sunlight into a single beam, you can generate temperatures hot enough to melt rock. We see evidence of vitrification at some ancient sites, stones that have been turned to glass by extreme heat. While Puma Punku doesn't look like melted glass, the presence of certain chemical changes could suggest a thermal process we don't understand. Did they use concentrated solar energy to soften the stone surface for finishing? But the sandstone was just the foundation. The real star of the show, the famous H-blocks, are made of andesite, and andesite is a whole different beast. It is volcanic, hard, and brutal to work with. Surely they couldn't have melted volcanic rock, right? The discovery of salt in the sandstone was shocking, but it was the analysis of the harder andesite blocks that uncovered a secret bordering on the biological. The ancient biotech. Andesite is born in fire. It comes from volcanoes. It forms at temperatures so high that any organic material is instantly incinerated. You should never ever find organic compounds inside natural volcanic rock. It is geologically impossible. So when the 2025 analysis of the Puma Punku H-blocks came back, the scientists probably thought the machine was broken. The spectral analysis showed a distinct spike in carbon and nitrogen. Nitrogen is a key building block of life. It is in your DNA, your proteins, your food. It is not supposed to be inside a solid block of gray lava. We aren't talking about moss or bird poop here. We are talking about inside the rock itself. This specific signature points to an organo-mineral binder. What does that mean? It means the builders might have used a recipe that included organic acids. Some researchers believe they used extracts from local plants, or even guano, which is rich in nitrogen, to create a chemical slurry that could dissolve and rebind the volcanic rock. Imagine taking crushed volcanic rock, mixing it with a potent acid made from specific Amazonian plants, and creating a paste. You pour that paste into a wooden mold of an H shape. It hardens. The result is a stone block that is chemically identical to natural andesite, except for one tiny flaw. It still holds the ghost of the organic binder used to create it. Dr. Joseph Davidovitz, a materials scientist, has been shouting this from the rooftops for years. He argues that the micro-pitting seen on the stones is exactly what happens when air bubbles get trapped in a poured geopolymer. Natural rock is dense. Cast rock has tiny air pockets. The scans show these pockets. And get this. The nitrogen spike was found at exactly 0.8 kilo-electron volts in the spectrum. That is a very specific fingerprint. It matches the signature of biological proteins. This opens up a rabbit hole of wild theories. If they were using organic material to engineer stone, did they have a form of biotechnology? There are legends of a plant used by the ancient birds of the Andes that could soften stone to build their nests. The locals call it the jacha plant. For centuries, explorers dismissed this as a myth. But what if the myth was actually a memory of a chemical process? What if the builders of Puma Punku weren't just stonemasons, but geneticists or chemists who bred plants specifically for their acidic properties? The idea that an ancient civilization had mastered soft stone technology is terrifying to mainstream history because it implies they didn't need the wheel or the pulley. They had a chemistry set that could move mountains. To settle this once and for all, a massive blind test was launched in 2025. Samples were sent to different labs around the world. The scientists didn't know where the rocks came from. They were just told to analyze them. The preliminary leaks from these studies are what is causing all the stir. They are confirming the presence of these organic compounds. If the H-blocks are artificial, it explains everything. It explains why every H-block is the same size. It explains the perfect inner angles that no chisel could reach. It explains the lack of tool marks. They didn't carve these intricate shapes. They cast them. They had a technology that allowed them to turn the hardest rock in the Andes into soft putty. This isn't just clever, this is advanced material science. It implies a knowledge of chemistry that rivals what we have today. And they did it 1,500 years ago. Or did they? There is one more theory. The wildest of them all. What if Puma Punku isn't 1,500 years old? What if it is much, much older? If the technology was this advanced, its sudden disappearance points to a global catastrophe that wiped the slate clean. The Great Reset. Open any mainstream history book or do a quick search online and you will see the official story. They tell us that Puma Punku, this impossible complex of stone in Bolivia, was built around 500 AD. They say it was built by the Tiwanaku culture, a primitive people, a people who had no written language, no wheel, and only soft copper and bronze tools. But that date is a mistake. Actually, it is worse than a mistake. It is a cover-up based on lazy science. Where does that 500 AD date actually come from? You need to understand this. You cannot carbon date stone. Stone is inorganic. It doesn't have a half-life in the same way biological things do. So, archaeologists dated the organic material they found buried next to the stones. They dated the garbage, and then they slapped that date on the monument. Think about how insane that is. Imagine a future archaeologist digging up the ruins of New York City in 5,000 years. They find the Statue of Liberty. But right next to the statue, they find a plastic Coke bottle from the year 2025. If they use the logic of mainstream archaeology, they would say, aha, the Statue of Liberty was built in 2025. It is ridiculous. It is bad. New technology is allowing us to look inside the stone itself. We are talking about advanced scanning of the organic binders trapped within the andesite blocks. This is the smoking gun. For years, engineers have looked at the H-blocks of Puma Punku and said, this isn't natural stone. The cuts are too perfect. The angles are exactly 90 degrees. The surfaces are smooth as glass. You cannot do this with a stone hammer. You cannot do this with a copper chisel. The scans are starting to confirm the geopolymer theory. This implies that the builders didn't cut these stones from a quarry. They poured them. They used a sophisticated chemical mixture, a prehistoric concrete that is harder and more durable than anything we use today. And while the peer-reviewed papers are still being fought over behind closed doors, the whispers coming from the research community are terrifying. The data inside the stones suggests a date that mainstream history refuses to accept. Some researchers are looking at a timeline of 12,000 years ago. Why is that number so scary to historians? Why do they fight it so hard? Because if Puma Punku is 12,000 years old, it breaks the entire model of human evolution. We are told that 12,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers. We were cavemen poking animals with sharp sticks. We weren't supposed to have chemistry, factory-style modular construction, or advanced engineering. But that date, 12,000 years ago, lines up perfectly with one specific event: the Younger Dryas. This is the moment everything changed. The theory is that a massive comet, or fragments of a comet, slammed into the ice sheets of North America and Europe. It wasn't just a bad day, it was the apocalypse. The impact would have instantly vaporized millions of tons of ice. It caused a global shockwave. It triggered instant climate change. And most importantly, it caused a flood of biblical proportions. We aren't talking about a little rain. We are talking about tsunamis of meltwater 1,000 feet high rushing across the continents, scrubbing the surface of the earth clean. It was a reset button, a total erasure of a sophisticated civilization that existed right before us. Don't believe me? Just look at the ruins of Puma Punku again. Really look at them. Does this look like a temple that slowly fell apart over time? Does this look like simple erosion? No. It looks like a bomb went off. The massive H-blocks, weighing hundreds of tons, are scattered like children's toys. They are tossed around in chaotic directions. Some are flipped upside down. Others are smashed into pieces. And look at the dirt. Many of these blocks are buried in deep layers of mud. This is alluvial mud, the kind of mud that comes from a massive flood event. This doesn't look like a slow decline of a culture. It looks like a sudden, violent murder. It looks like a massive tsunami of mud and water swept across the Altiplano. You have to remember, geology suggests the Andes Mountains might have been lower in altitude back then, or the water levels were much higher. Whatever hit this place, it hit it with the force of a nuclear weapon. It smashed this factory to pieces and buried the evidence in sludge. If we accept that Puma Punku is 12,000 years old, suddenly the puzzle pieces start to fit together. It connects to the Sphinx in Egypt. Geologists have been screaming for years that the erosion on the body of the Sphinx is caused by heavy, prolonged rainfall. But Egypt has been a desert for thousands of years. The last time it rained enough to cause that damage? The end of the last ice age, 12,000 years ago. It connects to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a massive, complex site that was deliberately buried around the same time. It implies that there was a global Golden Age civilization, a mother culture, a civilization that possessed this geopolymer technology. They had a global reach. They had the same mathematics, the same astronomy, the same obsession with building structures that could last forever. Maybe they were the Atlanteans Plato wrote about. Maybe they were the Watchers described in the Book of Enoch. Or maybe they were just us, humans, but humans who had reached a level of advancement we can't even comprehend. And here is the most unsettling part about the technology detected inside those cuts. It stopped. This is what keeps me up and inherit it. Usually technology moves forward. We go from the horse to the car to the plane. We build on what our ancestors did. But here the chain was broken. We started over from scratch. We were back to banging rocks together, shivering in caves while the remnants of their high-tech world lay in ruins around us. We looked at their giant stone blocks and created myths about gods and giants because we couldn't understand the science behind them. The disturbing thing the scans found isn't just a chemical signature, it is the proof that we are a species with amnesia. We reached a peak of technology once before. We were great. We were powerful. And then, in a single day, we were wiped out. So look at our world today. Are we walking the same path? We build our skyscrapers of glass and steel. We build our silicon chips. We trust in our cloud storage. We think we are the masters of the universe. We think we are invincible. But the H-blocks of Puma Punku are a silent warning. They are a tombstone for a civilization that was smarter than us. They were stronger than us. They built things designed to last for eternity. And even they couldn't survive the cataclysm. The technology inside the cuts is real. It is advanced. And it is dead. The question isn't whether it happened. The evidence is right there in the stone. The question is, are we smart enough to rediscover our lost history before our own clock runs out? So, if the ancients could mold rock like plastic and build machines out of stone, what other impossible monuments are actually just advanced chemistry? Are we staring at lost technology every day without realizing it? Hit that like button if you want more archaeological mysteries.